Namaste. Hello friends. Namo Buddhaya. We'll talk about some of the questions and comments. Actually, somebody's made one comment with regards to chanting, because there is the live chanting most mornings at 6 a.m. and evenings at 6 p.m. when conditions allow, such as electricity and being here, of course. You know, if I have to go into Bangalore, sometimes it's not practical. But the comments with regards to tuneful chanting, singing, musical chanting. You'll hear lots of beautiful chanting on the internet, on YouTube. Original chanting texts, Pali suttas, put in a tuneful way, which is very nice for learning. It helps. You can remember, of course, lyrics of songs from way back in your youth, if you're of my age, or from years back. You know, we learn also in school lots through tunes, through nursery rhymes, and it's a very good way of reinforcing information, attaching it to a tune. And this has been practiced for, well, I think forever, as long as humankind has been learning. Now, originally, the Buddha's teachings were passed down through the generations over about 500 years, just by chanting, by repeating the suttas, the teachings of the Buddha, in verse forms, gathas, they call them in India, gathas, G-A with a line across the top, so it's R-T-H-A with a line across the top, gatha, which means verse. So you take, for instance, the Ratana Sutta, the Mangala Sutta, and you take these wonderful teachings of the Buddha, and you put them in verses, recite them thus, like poetry form, and they're more easily received, more easily learned, and then more easily repeated and transmitted through the generations. And this is really how chanting came about in this particular tradition of Buddhism. But in one of the suttas in the Anguttara Nikaya, and this subscriber, dare I call him a subscriber or commenter, quite rightly points out, and I totally agree, that monks whom are prohibited from indulging in entertainment or having any form of entertainment under the 8th precept, but also are in the Patimokkha, must refrain from singing and dancing, any of these very sensual activities, which are very much linked to self, because of course they are creating within you this, so you're creating within, you could be, mistakenly, you could be creating within yourself a higher, a greater sense of self, by performing, by actually producing the entertainment. So taking this the 7th precept rather, of not in having any entertainment, actually making it covers also making entertainment. So if I was to go around singing and dancing, it wouldn't be appropriate. As well as it's not appropriate and it's against the precepts to watch or listen to singing and dancing. Now, in this sutta, the way it is described in very good detail is how the chanting, I don't know how this quite came about, because the Buddha and the person who wrote this will probably know the history behind the sutta itself better than I. But the Buddha wasn't perhaps, well, he probably did know through his incredible insight into the future, how it was going to happen in the future. But he, at this stage in his life, while still living, was able to say that, or someone did at least, say that if the notes or the the syllables, let's say, are drawn out in note form in any way, it can be construed as singing. And thus the monk's singing can lead to that monk's perception of having a nice voice, or I enjoy singing and people enjoy hearing me, or this and that kind of thing. So this is really what was trying to be prevented by making this rule. It's very vague, because of course this is all a matter of opinion. Now, music in India and in other parts of Asia is very different to music in Western countries. In Western countries there are like so many notes. I'm not a musician, but there are quite a few notes. In Asian countries they use different combinations of less notes and chords, I think, or something like this. So what I hear as music, or what I hear as Indian music tunes, doesn't sound tuneful or musical to me. And I would think that what Indian, culturally brought up Indian people hear of tunes such produced in the West, in the modern day, they hear isn't music to them. So you see where I'm going with this. What we hear in chanting is fairly monotone. There isn't much tune, much variance in the pronunciation. Now, some traditions take this to the absolute extreme of being very Gregorian chant. We have in the Western world, the chanting of certain Christian monks is very, it is actually very tuneful, but it's limited to a certain amount of notes. It's very, very expertly performed. But because it's limited to a certain number of notes, we don't consider it in the West as music or a tune. Because, well, I'm not a musician, but I mean, of course, you can make a wonderful tune out of just a few notes. So I'm really struggling as to how to explain this. Ajahn Sona, who is a very accomplished musician and also a monk of some 50 vasas, well, more than 40 vasas, and whose channel is certainly one of the best on YouTube for very many reasons, and he's I consider he's a teacher I admire and I've learned a lot from. I've never met him, but I watch all of his videos and listen to all of his talks and try and listen to most of his retreats, and his retreats for lay people also. He speaks in one particular talk very expertly on this subject, about chanting and the art of chanting and not singing. And he's very qualified to do so, and he puts it very succinctly. So I would refer anyone who's got any doubts about how chanting should be done or heard, tries to find that video. Now, his channel is such that you can search anything on it and find it very easily, so I'm sure you can. So rather than go on too much more about that, I will just say I've never professed to be very good at chanting, and I've even said I don't like chanting. I find it a very uncomfortable procedure. Now, this is primarily because I used to very much enjoy music as a layperson, enjoy singing, and enjoy listening to music. I was in another one of my former lives, in lay life, within this life, I was in musical shows performing, and it was a very enjoyable part of my life and an enjoyable hobby of mine. So to then have to chant what are beautiful words or lyrics, beautiful sentiments and wonderful teachings of the Buddha with a dour kind of expressionless monotone in that manner, I find it very difficult. So it's not that I don't like the chanting itself, it's very hard to exercise restraint in terms of tone. When you don't know the chanting, it's much easier. This is partly why I don't learn it, practice it very well. I prefer to just read it out of the chanting book, because then there's no temptation or inclination to go up or down with the chanting or the notes. So I'll apologize if occasionally I might. It certainly doesn't sound tuneful to me. It sounds awful, but if it's construed in any way that I'm singing, I'm certainly not singing. Where I come from, that would not be considered as singing at all. It would be considered very much as just chanting. Oh, this is a monk and he's chanting. You would never think, wow, that's tuneful, and go around humming that. Well, you might if it's a particularly repeated verse, but that's how it comes out naturally from me. I do all of this naturally. There's no planning, no real even forethought. I press record on here and just do what I ordinarily do. Also, I'm on my own, with the exception of anyone the other side of this phone, whom is getting this on YouTube. Occasionally one or two other monks might be there whilst I'm here. It's when you're chanting on your own, you're determining the pace, the pitch and everything. When you chant in a group, it's much more easy to flatten it out, because you follow a leader whom is an expert in chanting, as opposed to me, who's very amateur in chanting and new to it, and you follow his lead like a conductor of an orchestra, and all of the group is chanting in that same manner. So it can sound very nice, but it can sound, to someone who's used to music and tunes, and what in the West we'd call conventional singing, it could sound quite awful, especially if they don't know the language. So it would sound like some religious verse, and that only, with no meaning. So I put everything I can into the chanting, and if it comes out a little bit with a bit too many notes than is prescribed in the Anguttara Nikaya specifically, then I can only apologize. I can't help that. I'm no expert either at singing or chanting, and don't profess to be. I'm just trying to put together something in reverence, out of respect for the Buddha's teachings, in a manner that I can understand, and hopefully by repeating it also in English, English-speaking people can also get the meaning of those Pali verses. So really that's, I suppose, what I had to say about chanting. But I think the phrase used was, if this is how chanting is going in contemporary Buddhism. Well, no. I am not representative of really either traditional or contemporary Buddhism. I'm just one monk. To the large extent at the moment, this Vassa practicing alone here. If I'm chanting in the temple in Bangalore with the rest of my fellow bhikkhus, of which there are 34 bhikkhus currently, 24 staying there for the Vassa, that's including me, but I'm not there, so it's 23 there. But if I'm with those 24, I wouldn't even be chanting here what I'm chanting, because I'm chanting from kind of the international chanting book of Pali chanting, but here in India they use their own Indian chanting, which is quite different. And again, would be perhaps, you'll recognize the suttas within it, which are the same, but all of the homage, preliminary and supreme praise of the Buddha, this part of it, and the puja part of it is quite different. So again, I adapt to wherever I am. When I was in Thailand, I adapted to the chanting there. So I'm nomadic, I have to adapt. But when I'm on my own, it just comes out as it's read. I've spent way too long on that one, haven't I? It wasn't really a question though, so much as a comment. It was a useful comment. I don't not appreciate it. I thank the person for the time to share with me and everyone else his wisdom on these subjects. Whether it's really that relevant to our practice, a detail such as that, I'm not sure. I'd rather be talking. It does come into Sila, yes, and then if we're in breach of the 8th precept and we're producing top 10, we have this musical list. I don't know whether they have this in India, but the sort of, you're producing number 1 hits or something out of Buddhist chants, then that's really not cool. It's not the done thing. But that's really not the case, is it? I mean, you'll find certainly on YouTube there are some very popular it's very expertly done chanting, which is very tuneful and enjoyed all over the world. If you go to Bodh Gaya, you will continually hear a recognizable chant in tune of Buddham Saranam Gacchami all day long there. And it's probably one of the most played popular videos on YouTube. It's right up there in the top thing, and it's tuneful. Why? Because it's recognizable by everybody. And isn't this the point of a religion, that you make it available to as many people as possible in a way that they can receive it? You don't make it exclusive to your own particular ideals and say it has to be done this way or don't bother. You go away, with your tunes, because then it's really just, to begin with, we have no idea how it sounded exactly 2,566 years ago. But if you listen to some music today, which dates back prior to that in India, I hear it in the festival nights here in this little village. It's very loud. There's lots of notes and music and horns and things all going on like this. Now, I think the idea behind that sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya was to draw our chanting away from that kind of lavish entertainment into the focus of the words themselves. Not to make the words themselves sound austere, dour and miserable, but not to make them the lavish entertainment that folks here in India enjoy so very much, but to make it something whereby they can listen to it nicely, but still appreciate all the words therein. So that's as I see it. I could be more tuneful about it, but I'm really trying not to be. It's quite difficult. Okay, well, this is a nice little question. Because again, I didn't look at the time, did I? I have heard the word wise used instead of right for the Noble Eightfold Path. So I don't think wise is quite accurate. I've heard the word wise in other aspects of Buddhist lists, like wise attention and such like, translated from Pali. But wise implies wisdom behind it. So say if you take, for instance, right speech as an example, number 3 of the Noble Eightfold Path. Right speech. Now, right speech covers speech that is, well, the way I look at right speech is I take 5 points, and right speech covers these 5 points. That it is timely, it is spoken at a suitable time to the person you're speaking to. So not when they're just rushing to the toilet or they haven't eaten for 23.5 hours. No point to bring up a serious subject with that person, that individual, just then. wait a little while until they've eaten or they've been to the toilet, and find an appropriate time. So it should be timely. It should be truthful. Now this is the fourth precept, refrain from lying. Now some people say the fourth precept encompasses all of these 5 points, as in no harmful speech. It really doesn't. It is just refrain from untruthful speech, or refrain from lying. Now, if you can do that, never ever lie, therefore you're keeping the fourth precept, even a white lie of the most insignificant nature, then worry about the other 4 aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path, right speech. Don't try and combine the 2. It's a big enough hurdle to keep the fourth precept. Don't make it harder. Yes? Keeping those 5 precepts is the most important thing. So don't take one of them, isolate it, and make it harder than it actually is. This is not what the Buddha taught, is it? He gave us 5 simple precepts: refrain from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and intoxicants. Don't then take each one, individualize it, and create another dozen precepts out of it. No. Don't lie. What can be more simple than that? Okay, not so easy to put into practice, but it's quite simple. I've actually now gone into another whole line of another comment and question, haven't I? But I suppose let's deal with these, let's say, more critical ones all in one go. And I'll leave the nice ones to later. But this is a nice question I've got here about right and wise. So let's just get back to the point. So if we take right speech and we call it wise speech, then say a little boy comes along, grazes his knee and he's crying, and I say, oh, don't worry, your mummy will be coming along soon and she can kiss it better and all will be okay. Okay, what I'm actually saying there is not wise speech. It's a whole lot of nonsense, in a way, isn't it? Your mummy's coming along and she'll kiss it better. It's just going to get better anyway, you know. I'm saying nonsense, but I'm speaking kindly. It's kind speech, but it's not wise speech. But it is right speech. I hope that makes sense, yes? So right speech covers it's right, as opposed to unkind, untruthful, untimely. I mean, untimely also could be construed as, so untimely could be wise, but it's untimely, so it's not right. Does that make sense? So if I say to somebody something about something unrelated to what they're about to do when they're rushing off to the toilet, for instance, then it might be wise to tell them about this matter, but it will be more sensible to wait until they come back when they can concentrate on what you're saying. So right speech covers these 5 things, yes? So timely, truthful, kind, like I've just said, it should be kind. It should be also useful, as opposed to just talking nonsense. So we have this word sampapalapa, which means idle chit-chat. So just, okay, idle chit-chat is just generally filling the gaps of silence. Sometimes it's done through politeness, sometimes it's done through your own anxiety, sometimes it's just because we're bored, we have nothing else to do, so we're chitter-chatter about stuff. And can also include gossip to some extent, but gossip can be covered by all of these 5 in a way, like malicious speech and so on and so forth. This is something also that people like to try and include in the 4th precept, but it all comes under right speech, all of it. That is where in the Noble Eightfold Path we get all of our guidelines for living our lives. in terms of right view, right intention, and then right speech. Right speech covers everything to do in terms of our actions. And then with right action, right livelihood, then we have actions of our body. So actions of body, speech and mind. It's all covered there in the Noble Eightfold Path. So we don't bring that into the precepts, not in its entirety. The precepts are there, moral precepts, to be kept in order that we refrain from those very harmful actions of body, speech and mind, like killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, or taking intoxicants. So they are separate things, despite the arguments that have come through that I've seen, I've not got involved with, but seen, that saying that it's all one thing. No, it's not. We wouldn't have the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, the 8 precepts, the 10 precepts, and so on. We wouldn't have these things if they were all one thing. We'd just have one list. I'd be sitting here with just one list of things talking about that. We can summarize lots of it and say Sila, Samadhi, Panya. Yeah, Sila covers half of the Noble Eightfold Path and all of the 5 precepts. But that's how we can summarize it in its entirety. But if we want to understand it, it has to be separated. It's the way it's been taught by the Buddha. It's nothing to do with me. It's nothing to do with anyone other than the teachings that have been passed down by means of that chanting, via the teachings of the Noble Eightfold Path, for thousands of years, millennia, 2,566 years. And this, so this wise and right. So right is, I think, why. It's sama is the word. It's a Pali word, which doesn't really translate directly as right. It's the closest in the English we can get to its translation. So this is another thing. Don't pick one English word, like dukkha is translated as suffering. Well, then people say, oh, Buddhism's all about suffering. Well, it's not really. It's about happiness and joy and peace and tranquility. And well-being in general. It's about all of these positive things. It's about becoming free from suffering. But dukkha really doesn't translate directly into any one word. It translates into its real meaning is it's the center of a wheel hub, and if that was slightly off center, the wheel would wobble along a little bit. This is kind of a whole sentence, a paragraph, if you like to translate it into its real meaning, where it comes from. So it's unsatisfactoriness more than suffering. But if you take each English word or French word, Italian or whatever language is your mother language, and then spend days and hours arguing over the meaning of that word, it's pointless, because this is not the word. The word was originally Pali. You can perhaps bother yourselves with arguing over what is the correct translation of the Pali, but why? Just know what it means, experience its meaning, experience the feeling of it in the body, your reactions to it in the mind, how it is, the truth of it. Not, as they call it, these semantics of just, oh, he says it this way, he says it that way, tomato, tomato, potato, potato nonsense. This doesn't matter. It's just words, it's language. Right speech is really saying nothing at all, doing, practicing. There's far too much discussion, far too much debate, far too much talking about what we could just be doing, which is our practice, which is Sila, covering all of the precepts and half of the Noble Eightfold Path. Samadhi, meditation, practicing mindfulness of a meditation object and developing one-pointed concentration or focus on that meditation object and becoming free, detached, undistracted from bodily feeling, from perception, thought, and being able to see the hindrances, the obstacles in the way, of you getting to that stage for what they really are. Just seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. Just that. And nothing more. Hearing is hearing. It doesn't have to create a reaction in you. And through this practice of samadhi, of practice of meditation, we are developing this. It requires no conversation, no debate, no argument. When you experience the truth, there's nothing to argue about. If someone else experiences the truth, they're going to experience the same truth as you. If you have two different experiences, one of them isn't true. One of them is just imagination. But you know, through your own experience, whether something is real or you've imagined it. If you really, really think deeply into what it is you are experiencing, if you really understand the truth, the Four Noble Truths. And we do this by practicing this Noble Eightfold Path. And yes, I think it's better summed up as right than wise. So that's super. Anyway, good question. So, how long have I been talking for? Let me skip to another question. Oh, here's that one about the fourth precept. Yes. So, yeah, so someone was struggling with the fourth precept because it's so difficult. Of course, yeah. If you're trying to do right speech and you're treating that as one of the precepts, the hardest point on the Noble Eightfold Path is right speech. Under right speech, quite rightly as well pointed out by the person commenting on the chanting, is that you are creating, if you're giving the wrong impression about chanting, either you're saying something in the chanting incorrectly, or in terms of the way you're singing it, chanting it, whatever it, putting it forward, it could be considered as wrong speech too, he was saying. So yeah, I mean, even subtle things like that can be considered wrong, not wrong speech, but not right speech. Okay, I say not wrong because there's nothing wrong. You can say something that there'd be nothing morally wrong with it, but it wouldn't be considered as right speech. It would be perhaps at the wrong time, or in the wrong situation, or to the wrong person, or just inappropriate for the moment. It could still be right factually. It could be still right in terms of even certainly in terms of the precepts, but even in terms of some of those aspects of right speech in the Noble Eightfold Path. But you still use your better judgment and say, right, this is not the time to talk to this person about this, or this isn't the right sort of person to receive what I have to say. So there is a time for silence. So that's not right speech, but it is. An absence of saying something is right. Sama. So sama is the word that's used. Sama. And right view, right intention, right speech, they're all prefixed by sama. So, the fourth precept. So I think we've covered that one as good as we can. How long have I been a monk for? Well, I've been a monk for 3 years. I was ordained as a novice 3 years ago, and then coming up to 2 years, I've been a bhikkhu. So you know, this is the full ordination or higher ordination. To some extent, that's largely irrelevant. It's not in terms of our monastic etiquette and how things go on within the sangha. It's very important how many vasas you've had. But another reference was made that it's certainly in the Thai forest tradition in Thailand, it's certainly considered inappropriate for a monk of less than 10 vasas, whom you call a teacher, an ajahn, to give Dharma talks. And, well, yeah, I kind of agree with that, which is why I've often said at the start of these, I'm not giving Dharma talks, I'm just sharing my opinions. which is why I'm not wearing my full robes at the moment, and why I don't pay homage to the Buddha, say Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato prior, because I don't want this to be construed as a formal Dharma talk. I always add that caveat. Now, I don't do it every time. It would get quite boring if I did. You know I'm a monk, a junior monk, a Navaka Bhikkhu. Anyone who's watched this for more than, a few weeks even. I don't profess to be an Ajahn, a senior monk of many, many vasas, but I have been practicing this Noble Eightfold Path and on 8 precepts now for nearly 10 years. And I've been a practicing Buddhist for 15 or 12 or 15, I don't know, I've lost count, but for a long time. And before that, I was living in solitude, alone. It was before I knew so much about Buddhism, or much at all about Buddhism, but I was practicing, as you might see, religious ascetics in India, sadhus and such like, wandering around my own country in England, and being very independent, but really focusing on this spiritual side of life as opposed to the materialistic side of life. And then prior to that, I have a lifetime, of course, of experience in worldly matters. And this can be seen maybe as negative or positive. I can only see that from my own point of view in anyone as positive, because it means I have a wealth of experience to draw from when it comes to identifying my own defilements, identifying my own hindrances, and then when people ask me about their own, I can draw from that, my own experience, that same identification, and share with them how I dealt with it in the past, what I know about it from a place of experience. Because that's the 5th of those. I didn't get to it, did I? Everything you should say should come from your own experience. Or there's no point, you should practice what you preach. There's no point you saying to somebody, you must not lie, if you go around lying all the time. Or you must not drink alcohol if you drink alcohol. That's the 5th of those 5 things. So, yeah, I've only been a monk for 3 years. I mean, really officially, in terms of the Sangha, not even quite 2, because this is my 2nd Vasa. So, and the first Vasa, I hadn't been a bhikkhu for a whole year. So not even 1.5 years, if you look at it that way. But it's irrelevant. You've got people who have been driving for 50 years on the roads in England, who are probably the worst drivers on the planet, and people who have passed their test last week, who are probably the best drivers on the planet. Why? Because they've just learnt, and they're driving correctly in accordance with the rules in this day and age. Whereas the ones who've been driving for 50 years are probably going blind and deaf and forgotten how to drive the rules and making a right mess of it. Now, I'm not saying that's just a massive generalization, but I'm trying to avoid saying that I have met, seen and know of, and there certainly are, monks of decades of vasas, 40, 50 vasas, whom you wouldn't want to aspire to being like, put it that way, as a good Buddhist practitioner, or consider as having attained anything. Of course there are that really are arahants and have attained to all that we aspire to, but there are so very many more that are not that. And it is an example of how many vasas you are is irrelevant. But that aside, I'm not professing to be even a teacher. I'm just someone, I never even say I'm answering your questions. I say I'm talking about your questions. I'm talking about your comments. I'm sharing my experience. That's all I ever say. You can go back through all of my videos, and if you have the technology to do so, you try and ever find me ever saying that I'm teaching, that I'm giving a Dharma talk, or that I'm answering a question. Because I'm not. YouTube does it for you. It transcribes it. So you can do this. It's only comes naturally through right speech that I don't particularly say those things, because I'm here to share my experience as I progress on this path with you in order that you can see some of the pitfalls as they come along as well, and recognize those in yourself. So where did that go? Oh yeah, how long have I been a monk for? Oh yes, so in answer to your question, 3 years. Oh dear, right. Okay, that's a bit of a big one. So someone wants, the same as I think came up yesterday, talk about now another matter of Kundalini. Can I talk about Kundalini and knowingness, or aware of your own thinking, and why this isn't taught about much in Buddhism? Well, the Buddha never talked about Kundalini. You refer to it as something which it isn't anyway, from what I know of it, but he didn't talk about Kundalini as either a meditation object or a practice. This is a yogic tradition here in India, but not something the Buddha got involved with. So it doesn't really relate to awareness, conscious awareness and knowing. I suppose in terms of the practice, it really is focusing on particular energies in the body and breathing exercises, but Anapanasati is doing that. It is bringing your awareness, your focus onto the breath. I'll go back to this other question here, which is related to that, because then it flows nicely. That you want to include a Subha practice. So that's, as far as that previous question is concerned, while the Buddha didn't speak about Kundalini, so I can't answer that. I want to include a Subha practice in my meditation along with metta, any advice on routine, etc. For instance, one day Anapanasati, next day metta, next day a Subha, then repeat. Okay, well, I wouldn't get into a routine like that, no. It's good, however, to recognize those other practices. If you take Anapanasati as your core practice, I'm glad you mentioned that, because then I don't have to consider the other 39 meditation objects that the Buddha mentioned. He used Anapanasati, so it's what I recommend and what I use myself. This is simply awareness of breathing, noticing the breath coming in, the breath going out. Why is this the best meditation object we can use? Because it's always with us, it doesn't run out, it's not reliant on anything else, and you can use it in any of the postures, sitting, standing, walking, or lying down. Whatever's going on around you, you can bring your awareness to the breath, and instantly you're there in meditation, at least for a moment. And it only takes that long to become enlightened. The Buddha said that. A finger snap of mindfulness of the breath is a glimpse of Nibbana. So, we bring our attention to the breath. Now, we have hindrances, 5 hindrances: sensual desire, aversion, tiredness, restlessness and worry, and doubt. The first 2, sensual desire, is wanting stuff. I'm sitting down to meditation, but wouldn't it be nice to listen to some nice music? Or wouldn't it be nice to eat some pizza and Coca-Cola? Or biryani and thumbs up? Or wouldn't it be nice to go singing and dancing? Or wouldn't it be nice to go out with that beautiful lady I saw today and have some nice dinner? These are the hindrance of sensual desire. And if this is something that becomes difficult and overwhelming, it's always there, but if it's one of the stronger of those 5 hindrances, then we use a practice called a Subha, which means Subha is beautiful, A is not, or unbeautiful. So it's not a practice of focusing on particularly ugly, disgusting things, but in a way it is. It's focusing your attention on the unbeautiful nature of things. So let's take the beautiful lady you saw that you'd like to have dinner with. If you bring your attention, and apologies again if I'm making gender-specific references, it's the only way I know how to communicate. It applies to all folks, yes? What's the word? Different what folks, different strokes is the expression, or something like that. Anyway, say you got this in your mind and it's mucking up your meditation. This is the time when one practices asubha. So you don't take asubha and metta as, oh, I'll just practice those for the sake of it because I've heard of them, like anapanasati. No, you practice anapanasati, mindfulness of the breath. Then when you're having problems with the hindrances, you use these other practices as tools. Asubha, with regards to that image of a beautiful lady and you're going to have dinner, then if you can then know, then not necessarily the physical aspects of unattractiveness. So, I mean, for instance, one can take it literally and imagine the lady getting very old. Not that there's anything unbeautiful about age, but if you're young, you'd probably not be so attracted to an 80, 90-year-old lady as you might someone of your own age. So you can look at that as a very direct, visual way of understanding that what you see isn't what you eventually get. All things are subject to change, anicca, and unsatisfactory as a result of that, and out of your control. However nice she appears today, she will not be so nice in decades to come. Also, even the next day, the morning after, or even towards the end of the meal. Maybe she drank lots of alcohol and got horribly drunk. You can just bring your awareness, your attention to these aspects that could happen and do happen that are out of your control, rather than focusing on just the beautiful lady and then the candlelit dinner at the nice table with the white cloth. Imagine if she's sitting in front of you at the table and she starts picking her nose, and this puts it on your plate in front of you. How would you feel about that? Or she has something in her mouth and she takes it out of her mouth and puts it on her plate and talks to you, and then picks it up and puts it back in her mouth. No, there's actually nothing really morally wrong with that, is there? But it isn't beautiful behavior. It's unbeautiful. It's asubha. So the traditional practice of asubha is to break down the body into the 32 parts of the body. Hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth and skin, and then the rest following: bones, bone marrow, sinews, flesh, guts, blood, livers, kidneys, stomach contents, urine, feces, pus, all of these things contained in this bag of skin. But without even doing that, you can just simply look at the lady eating her dinner. What's going to happen to the dinner? How's it going to come out in the end? Where's it going to be tomorrow? And this is sufficient for that particular one-off example. And it applies to everything. Pizza. Pizza's very nice. Coca-Cola, very nice when you're hungry, when you want it. Now say you've eaten lots of it and you're full up. Do you want any more? No. The beautiful nature has gone. The unattractive nature of all of the packaging, the boxes, the leftovers there are not so appealing. Or again, you can imagine eating some pizza, chewing it up. If you take it out of your mouth, even when you're still hungry, and put it on your plate, it's still the same pizza. No one else has touched it. It's only been in your mouth. Do you want to put it back in your mouth? Probably not. Even if you're hungry, probably not. You've taken it out of your mouth, you put it on the plate, nothing's affected it. It's perfectly the same pizza. It's better, you've chewed it up a bit. But do you want it still? No. Now, this is asubha, the unattractive nature of it. So that's sensual desire as a hindrance. Then the next hindrance is aversion, or akin to the root defilement of hatred, let's say. So how do we deal with that? We use the practice of metta, because it counteracts hatred or disliking or aversion. And that practice is such that we begin always with ourselves. Loving kindness is how we translate metta. Again, it's a Pali word. It means so much more than that. But it's a good enough description, loving kindness, of the mother to her child's kind of loving and kindness, not the attraction kind of love to another being's personality or appearance, but strictly the unconditional loving kindness of a mother to her child. In the Kalyanamita Sutta, as a mother protects her child, her only child. This unconditional love. Now, if you have hatred, aversion building up in you, then you can, as a very quick exercise, remember that. This person, it's often directed towards a person, let's say, or a group of individuals. Even that little verse can quickly snap you out of it, knowing that, well, this person's mother loves this individual unconditionally. How can I hate them? Whatever they're doing to me, whatever that person does, even to their mother will still love their child unconditionally. It's nature. Even if the mother gave her child up at birth, for 9 months she loved that child unconditionally. Even if she thought psychologically in her thinking mind she didn't, she did. Her body would not reject that child through all of her actions of body and speech, and mostly with mind, subconsciously, if not 100% intentionally. This child was loved unconditionally. You can bring this into your practice. This is metta. But it's more traditionally done at beginning with yourself. You know this already, this isn't your question, but just for people who don't know. And then you don't really radiate it. It's often described as radiating metta to this whole world and universe and all beings. You develop it within yourself, and then people, all beings, experience it. Like a flower growing, producing a beautiful bloom and a beautiful perfume. It isn't particularly sending it to all beings, but all beings who come across it within its presence will experience the beautiful bloom and the beautiful perfume. So this is more how metta works in actuality. But if you feel that it's really transmittable, then you can certainly use this as part of your practice. But we begin with ourselves, then to our near ones and dear ones, our loved ones, our family, our friends, people physically nearby, people not so near, further away, and we extend it eventually to all beings throughout the universe, and even to the different realms of heavens, hells, and animal realms, etc. But these practices aren't for the sake of it. They are for purpose. So don't every day sit down to a routine of, unless you need to, of hair of the head, body, nails, teeth and skin, and then I must love myself, love my mother, father, love my enemies, love the people I'm indifferent to, love this country, that country. As a routine, it just becomes by rote, and nothing should be done in this practice by rote like that. Certainly, to some extent, if you're really struggling with the practice, you might start off that way. But then you find the benefits, and you explore and you develop the benefits. As you develop metta within yourself, you can develop that quality of metta and see how it changes your experience of life. It changes others' experiences of you. It changes even the way when you're walking down the street, the local dogs behave. Do they all bark and go crazy when you walk by, or do they just carry on doing what they were doing? This is the development of metta in reality. If I walk down there and the dogs all start barking, I know I've not been practicing my metta correctly. If they're all peaceful, I know I have. And asubha, well, if you're getting a lot of sensual desire coming up, that's because you're seeing all the beauty in things, which is nothing wrong with that at all. Nothing morally wrong with that. But if it's distracting your practice, then just bring your attention, just adjust it slightly. You don't have to adjust it much to see the unbeautiful or the not so beautiful aspects of all things. Because everything has in its inherent nature this uncertainty and this subject to change and nature. Everything has this unsatisfactoriness or dukkha, and everything is out of our and its control, anatta, with no self, no control. So bring those practices in as and when needed, and adjust and play around with them accordingly. But don't certainly say, I'm doing anapanasati today and doing this tomorrow, because then you're not really having a meditation object. You're always having underlying it your anapanasati meditation, your meditation object. And then these are bolt-on extras, asubha and metta. I think many people will say something different to what I have just said. But that is my practice, and I find more appropriate and more useful and more and works. Something that I think works in real life, not just sitting on a meditation mat in a meditation center for 10 days. It's what will go with me from here 2,500 miles across this country on very noisy buses with lots of people of a very different nature to myself without too much difficulty. That's where you see the results. Now, 15 years ago, I would have probably ended up in quite a lot of trouble on that journey through my attitude then of, well, why are they all behaving like this? What's going on? You know, shouldn't it be this way? Shouldn't it be that way? Through this practice, I've developed some equanimity. And this is the whole point of it, for us to have more happy, enjoyable lives and overall well-being, and establish contentment, becoming free from suffering in this lifetime. So I'm sure that must be time enough. I will hopefully leave it there, having addressed a couple of the, let's say, I won't say negative issues that have arisen in the comments. Nothing's negative. But sometimes it's very rare, through all of the thousands of comments that come in, it's very rare that there's anything that one could even consider is negative. And on the 2, 3, 4 possible occasions that it has been that, it's been more of some people wanting to get into an argument or a debate about something. Well, this, for me, isn't a forum for that. There are many of those. This is a forum for me to share my experiences. If people want to listen to that, they can. If they don't have to. And it's based on a sharing of my experience and understanding of the Buddha's teachings. And if people have a different opinion of that, that's also fine, because there are so many channels like this or other mediums one can read up, look and to suit your own opinions. It's really not right speech, appropriate or wise or necessary to have long drawn out arguments in the comments section about one tiny word misplaced, either by myself or somebody else, or one misunderstanding misplaced or inappropriate by someone or somewhere else that can go on for days. I was happy to see someone said this isn't actually doing them any good, and they ended the conversation. Because I ended the conversation after the second comment, because I don't get involved in those threads from my point of view, but they can continue forever as far as I'm aware, but there's really no point. Anyway, they're so few and far between. Even now I've spent more time talking about that than all of the positive questions, but only because I think they are really in a way 3 relevant aspects that I've spoken of today, which are chanting and the singing, not singing, chanting, this little debate over the 4th noble truth, whether it's lying or overall harsh and malicious speech, and finally whether a monk of 10 or 40 years as a monk should be the only person you should ever listen to, as opposed to a monk of, no years, or even not a monk. There are many lay people, I didn't mention this, but lay people out there who are very experienced Dharma teachers. Dhammacarias, they call them here. They're a breed of people. They're properly ordained. They are lay Dharma teachers. There are millions of them here in India. They're not monks. They live by the 5 precepts. They're married with families, but they're so expert in the Dharma, more so than anyone, more so than a lot of monks I know, certainly more so than me. And there are so many of them here in India. And if you could benefit from their wise understanding of the scriptures, of the practice, then why not? but they haven't been a monk for. There's one Dhammacariya I know around here who he was a monk temporarily in Sri Lanka for a short time, but he's been, I think, a Dhammacariya for over 40 years, 50 years, teaching Dharma and practicing daily. That's all he does. He's more or less given up. He doesn't work. He has sufficient resources to support his wife, and this is all he does. Then there are monks whom have just sat in a monastery receiving dana day in, day out, and may know all of the chanting and know all of the scriptures, but perhaps in terms of practice are not so much there. So it's not really just down to, it's more not quantity, it's about quality. And I'm not relating this to myself in any way, I'm relating this to generally speaking, because this was the theme of the thread of the comment that I glanced upon, but I didn't even read it properly, so I may have picked out the wrong bits. But there we are. So if there's anything useful in this today, I hope you can use it. Otherwise, you can just please let it go. Thank you for watching.